Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining. We are so excited for this topic. It's going to be a great conversation. We're going to give everyone about 2 more minutes to log in and get settled. So now would be a great time to go grab a cup of coffee, and we'll begin the webinar in about 2 minutes. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Being All In, How Insights Can Help Brands Hit the Right Note When Supporting Causes. I just want to give a few logistical notes before we get started. There's 2 different ways to communicate with us throughout the webinar, the chat box and the Q&A box. Both of those can be found at the bottom of the screen. Please use the chat box for all technical issues and the Q&A box for any questions related to the content of the webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce Zoe Dowling, our SVP of Research here at Focus Vision. You may recognize her from some of our other webinars we've done in the past. Zoe uses her extensive research expertise to help clients best apply Focus Vision's technological solutions. At this time, Zoe is going to turn off her camera and we're going to dive into the presentation. Take it away, Zoe.
Well, thank you, Rachel, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining us for this next 30 or so minutes as we talk about how insights can help brands hit the right note when supporting causes. Now, in today's world, consumers are often looking for more from a brand than them simply selling them their product or service. Brands need to be a good citizen. They need to find their greater purpose. Now, for some brands, this purpose is interwoven into their brand DNA, while other brands support different causes that, for the most part, should really be for all part, align with their brand essence. Let's take a look at some examples. Now, here's one I think that many of you be familiar with, Patagonia. You know, they have a very clear environmental and sustainability purpose that's carried throughout their brand. In this example, the company's promoting clothing repair, which they, Patagonia, do for free in order to reduce waste. Another well-known ad is their 2011 Don't Buy This Jacket campaign, urging people to think about consumerism and waste. Risky? Yeah, but it worked for them because it's so connected with their core brand values. Another brand that has environmental and sustainability elements going right through their core is The Body Shop. This has been in place throughout its 40-year history. The Body Shop was created in 1976. And on their 40th anniversary, a new commitment was taken with its Enrich, Not Exploit strategy that sets up 14 targets to be achieved by 2020, assisting vulnerable communities around the world as further reducing environmental impact for the brand. And you can see here, this is how they're explaining what they're doing, and it's linked with a marketing campaign along with something that's entirely aligned with their brand. In this final environmental and sustainability example, Coca-Cola took on some cause marketing to raise awareness about the plight of polar bears. Now, polar bears have been their mascot since 1922, and polar bears have done quite a lot for Coca-Cola. But until 2011, Coca-Cola hadn't done much for them. Recognizing this, they teamed up with the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, WWF, to raise awareness and funds to support polar bear conservation. It's a successful campaign for them, and it also managed to raise a good deal of funds for polar bear conservation. Now, shifting gears a bit, when we look at health causes, Warby Parker, there's another brand that has this kind of running throughout their not just their business model in terms of selling eye care, eyeglasses, but it's also part of its greater purpose to provide glasses to those in need. The company was founded to meet the needs of people like the founder who were tired of overpaying for glasses. As a glasses wearer and myself, I know quite how much money I spend on them. And so they were looking to change that model, but they also recognized that over 1 billion people in the world don't have access to corrective eyeglasses. And so they put those two pieces together. And since founding in the early 2010s, they've distributed more than 4 million pairs of glasses through 10,000 emerging market entrepreneurs trained through their partner, Vision Springs. Apple isn't somebody you would necessarily immediately thinking of with a bit of a cause. But when you see it, you'll all be familiar, I think, with their Red Edition. And that was because Apple has a long-standing partnership with Product Red since 2006. And Product Red supports HIV/AIDS programs in developing countries. So what you can see here is the launch of the iPhone 8, the Product Red Special Edition that was earlier this year. And a certain number of the proceeds will go to Product Red initiatives for HIV/AIDS programs. And of course, you may be familiar with other companies such as Nike, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, that also have partnerships with Product Red. Now, in this final health example, we have Avon. They have long supported women's health causes, most notably through their Avon Breast Cancer Crusade, which started way back in 1992 and has raised a whopping $800 million to breast cancer causes. One of the examples, which I have on screen here, was the Avon 39 Walk to End Breast Cancer. Now, actually, last year was the last time they ran that walked that walk, I should say. They ended their initiative last year, but in July, they introduced the Kiss Breast Cancer Goodbye campaign in partnership with the American Cancer Society, making strides against breast cancer. So just another iteration version of their longstanding commitment to helping and supporting women's health in the area of breast cancer. Now, shifting gears from health causes, we have Dove, who's also taken on women's cause, but from a societal perspective. They launched their Campaign for Real Beauty in 2014 with much success and have continued with some variation of this campaign to date. In this example here on screen from 2013, they look to challenge women's perceptions of themselves and ultimately improve self-esteem. Another example that's along this kind of vein, and it's one that I actually absolutely love, is Always. Now, they have a long-standing commitment to empowering girls through puberty and education. And when this campaign came out in around 2013-14, they had taken a fresh look and said, I don't know that this message is coming through. And they looked to re-speak, to re-educate in different ways. So the ad, Like a Girl, challenges nomenclature that undermines girls, and I think in turns women's confidence, run like a girl, throw like a girl. And I think does a really, really nice way of meeting that objective, and was quite powerful. I remember seeing it in the Super Bowl when it aired. Taking a different look again at social causes, in 2015, the Ad Council launched a campaign around social inclusion and challenging people's biases. Now, actually, this campaign includes partnerships with 8 non-for-profits, including Anti-Defamation League, the Human Rights Campaign, amongst others, so viewers can get more involved in a cause that speaks directly to them. So it was a broader kind of diversity and inclusion under the label Love Has No Labels, but had different areas that you could focus on. Now, all of these examples that I've just taken you through have been successful illustrations of purpose and cause marketing, but it can go wrong. In this last example, we have the 2018 Super Bowl ad from Ram. They were aiming to promote social inclusion through a unity and love message, not uncommon for this year's Super Bowl ads, but instead faced widespread backlash for using Dr. Martin Luther King's voice and words. There's one tweet that I think sums up sentiment quite well. And it says, using MLK to sell trucks now, shameful and sad. The intent was good, but the execution fell short. And that's the real challenge. How do you support a cause in a way that's meaningful to your brand and your customers, particularly amidst a political and economic climate that is already divisive? How can brands support a cause without offending? What do your customers think about it? What does society think? What is going to be the implications for your brand? And this brings me to our LGBTQ study. During Pride Month in June this year, we actually noticed that a number of the brands displaying rainbow flag in their retail outlets and advertising, it felt like it'd been more than there had ever been. And we actually wondered about how people feel about LGBTQ representation within the media. So, like good researchers, we asked. Let me take you through what we did before I go into the findings. So we created a short 10-minute online survey. I will stress, as I always do, that we designed this to be mobile first. We've got to design in a mobile world today. But short survey, we wanted to get a good feel of the US population. So we spoke to 1,500 people and did a census match on age, gender, ethnicity, region as well. Now, what we ended up doing was sort of taking an ad testing approach, a copy testing approach. We found 3 print ads for targeted at LGBTQ community. And these ads, the brands themselves, that was not the point of the study, so that they don't matter per se. But it was a beer ad, there was a clothing ad, and there was a sunglasses ad. And so what we did was we did random exposure to one of 3 of those ads amongst our 1,500 people, and then asked them about their perceptions on the ad itself, the messaging, likability, moved into brand perceptions and purchase intent. And then we closed out the questionnaire by some specific questions on brands and LGBTQ support. So what did we find? Well, firstly, when we asked about sort of general feelings about LGBTQ representation in the media, overall, if we look at this, it's sort of mixed. You have a third that are very or somewhat satisfied with the representation, under half are feeling neutral, don't have feelings one way or the other, and a quarter are feeling very or somewhat dissatisfied. I think what I took away from this, because at first blush you could think, well, that's fairly mixed. But actually, if you look in terms of those that feel neutral, they don't feel one way or the other about it, and those that are feeling positive, very or somewhat satisfied, we have over 3/4 feeling okay about it. And I took that as a positive thing, as a good thing. Now, similarly, when we dived into the level of representation, that's the amount of representation of LGBTQ people within media, we found, again, roughly a half said that there should be more. A third said there should be more. Slightly less said that there should be less. And again, just over a third said it's about right. Again, having a look at that, we can see that 71% people feel that it's okay the way things are, or could be slightly more. So going a bit deeper, and being quite interested in, do brands have a responsibility to advocate for the community? And you can see here that almost 50% of people feel that yes, brands do have a responsibility to advocate for the community. And we can see this when we have a look at some of the verbatim, some of the quotes that people wrote in and told us. There is a sign and appreciation for signals of diversity and inclusion, because it's bold and daring to stand up for what you believe in and not feeling ashamed of your sexuality. I think it's about time we recognize this community. They use products and spend money like anyone else. People should see people in the media that are like them. And this one here that I found really summed up a lot of the sentiment and certainly resonated with me is, we need to see more diversity so it becomes acceptable to everyone. I want my kids to grow up in a world where everyone is considered okay, no matter race, religion, sex, and so on. So there really is that sense that signals of diversity, inclusivity being appreciated by people. Now, when we had shown people the ad, and they'd seen that, we then follow up and say, well, how do you feel about the brand? What is your perceptions of the brand? And we found that over a third, 39% of people actually feel more positive about the brand after viewing the LGBTQ ad. And just to put this into perspective, this is versus 19% of people who were feeling more negative about the brand. So again, clearly it's not a consensus, but consumer sentiment overall is leaning towards acceptance of supporting the LGBTQ community within the media. And we can see this by some of the comments that people had on after viewing the ad. I like seeing less conventional people. We need more diversity. It was plain comfortable and still sent a message. I liked how bold the statement and the depiction of the ad was. It's one way to really have people talk about these groups in a civil and polite manner. And it made me happy to see that companies embrace the LGBT community. It has been a long time coming, and it almost makes me feel a little emotional to see it, even in a beer ad. So for some people, it was just, hey, this is comfortable. It's no real big deal. And for others, that message, it felt, oh, phew, it's about time. We're getting there. And ultimately, what this did for the brand was actually create a bit of a halo effect. When we looked into what's the impact on the bottom line, how do people, what was purchase intent after seeing the ad? And we found that a third of people said that seeing an LGBTQ friendly brand has a positive impact on seeing their purchase decision. And again, just to put that in contrast with those that 17%, so those people that had a negative opinion and also then was somewhat less likely to purchase, that was 17% of the people versus 32% that said actually it would increase their likelihood to purchase. So overall, it can pay dividends for brands to actively support LGBTQ messages. Now, unsurprisingly, millennials are a driving force here. Millennials have been a key driver of messages of diversity, inclusiveness. In our study, we actually opened up by asking unaided, questions around, do you support a number of different causes? And this cohort, more than any other, self-described themselves as being advocate for multiple social causes, including environmental, racial, and animal welfare. So what we found that nearly 60% of millennials in our study felt that brands have a responsibility to support the LGBTQ community. And if you see the numbers on here, just contrast that to the boomers, who are only around 37% of people feel the same need. We also found that seeing an LGBTQ ad makes millennials feel more positive about the brand. Again, you're just under 50% versus 30% of boomers. And finally, it does make them feel more likely that they would purchase from the brand, just under 40% versus that 19% for boomers. So really, the findings are consistent with what others have reported. Millennials see themselves as taking responsibility to support disenfranchised groups, and it's no wonder that they expect others to do so as well. Now, perhaps a little bit more surprisingly in our results, disapproval in media representation isn't solely around personal bias. Going back to these numbers that I showed right at the beginning, what's the general feelings about LGBTQ within the media? When we look at those that are in the very and somewhat dissatisfied group, the quarter of people, 24%. Initially, our thoughts and my thoughts looking at the data is that's going to stem from personal feelings, bias, or from religious reasons, and certainly that did come through. However, the figure held even amongst groups that allied towards LGBTQ causes. And so we thought, that's interesting, let's have a look at what's going on. And what we found was that respondents didn't like the stereotypes and sensationalized portrayals. For example, gay men are always more flamboyant, lesbians are always manly. So there's a dissatisfaction about inaccurate portrayals or contrived placements of people from this community. So digging again into the comments, we see sums like the following. While we are seeing more LGBTQ people in media, they're usually for comedic purposes, or a lesbian couple introduced to appeal to male audiences. They're not as represented as they should be, and when they are, it is often not in the right light. People just put in an LGBTQ person in just to seem more inclusive, but it doesn't make them a key or central part to the media or make them someone the others, or they might make them someone that the others look down on. So they're not portrayed in a positive light necessarily. And then the last one here, I do not believe that what we see on TV accurately depicts people who live that lifestyle. They always seem to be overly flamboyant, bathed in makeup, extremely feminine. And of course, I'm speaking about the guys. So in summary, LGBTQ portrayals conform to stereotypes. They are unrealistic and they can often be superficial or token characters. So at the end of the day, what does this come down to? Well, it's all about authenticity. You've got to be true to the brand. You can't simply run an LGBTQ ad and call it a day. Can't just put in some stereotypical depictions of the community and think that you've done your job in representing them. So this brings me to the implications. Now there's 4 that I'm going to take you through. And the first one really follows on from that stereotypes. Really, we need to avoid stereotypes. It seems that anything less than a representation of how things really are has the potential to alienate consumers. Too often, minority groups are used to make a point or give the appearance of being inclusive. And if we just look at some images that I'd found, I mean, these feel very familiar. You know, they show, and I'm quoting from somebody from our study, they show very good looking and charming same-sex couples having the time of their lives and mixing with friends like everyone else. It's not the most realistic to real life. So what do we need to do? We need to normalize. For LGBTQ imagery, customers, people, we want natural. You know, advocate it without making a big deal about it. Like a scene with 2 dads and a kid who doesn't need to have a big rainbow flag on it. Just present it in the same way you would a straight couple. And another person said, don't appear as if you're bending over backwards. You don't want to come across as merely trendy or PC. It's a great thing to include LGBTQ people as regular folks, family members, friends of straight people. Normalize. So that's really what we need to be doing. Avoid the stereotypes and normalize. Now, moving on to our second implication is a very, very important one. Don't try to cash in. Consumers are right to challenge brands to work hard and do more. At the same time, brands are, after all, mixing an LGBTQ cause or any social cause with commerce. You know, then there we are here to make money, to have a profit, to stay in business. So not done sensitively or in the correct way, it can lead to a backlash if not done right. Again, going back to that Rand example, it was done with the best of intentions, but it just didn't come through in the right way. And in terms of the LGBTQ community, it can be, you know, using gay sexuality as a means to sell clothing comes off as inauthentic. Or more bluntly, as we can see on screen here, they're just trying to sell and using people's personal struggles to do so. It's a money move. And that doesn't go down well. What brands do need to do is be all in. The challenge for brands is to walk the talk. If you want to show that you truly embrace a movement or cause, it's not just about representation in the media or advertising, but representation in personnel decisions, supporting LGBTQ causes, events as well. Without providing this kind of broader level of support, a brand running an LGBTQ inclusive ad starts to look opportunistic. And I think it's very well summed up in this quote here from a respondent saying, stand behind what they say. Running an ad campaign using a same-sex couple is great. But if the brand is going to do that, why not endorse it publicly? Make a statement. Support rallies and the rights of individuals in court and in the community. If they really want to do this, they need to be all in. So moving on to our third implication, be true to your brand. At the end of the day, it's all about your strategy. How you do things in a way that's truly authentic to your brand. And of course, knowing that actually maybe if you take a stand on something, it might not resonate with everyone. And you may lose some customers, but I would say it might not be as many as you would expect. You are never going to please everyone, no matter what you do, not just in this instance, but any cause that you support or indeed any action that you may take, you're not going to please everyone. And you shouldn't try to. Know your target, speak to them, get their opinions, and understand who they are. And just as an example, a very topical example, is Nike. A couple of weeks ago, they came out with their latest version of their Just Do It ad with Colin Kaepernick. And that was created a lot of buzz. And it was actually quite divisive. And it did get a lot of feelings and sentiment going on there. But I would wager very strongly that everything that they did was based around very, very, very solid insights, understanding their target, who are going to be mostly millennials. As we see, they do support that kind of inclusivity, the social, the environmental, and all the different causes. They knew their target. They took a bit of a gamble, sure, but it, by all accounts, has paid off. And this brings me to my final implication. I've already mentioned this, but it's incredibly important to ask. Talk to your customers. Understand how they feel on a particular cause or set of causes if you're looking to identify one in which to align with. What's their passion points? How relevant is it to them? What would they like to see? And I would also suggest it's equally important to talk to your employees. The same ideas apply. What is true to your brand? What is true to the people that work for you? So ask and keep asking. Don't think about it as one and done. It's important to keep asking, keep your finger in the pulse of opinion, and of course, understand how things may shift. So just because a year ago or 6 months ago, this was opinion, well, that sentiment may well have changed. So it is important to keep asking. Now, before I open the floor for questions, I wanted to end with some reflection, some reflexivity on the study. What would I do differently? What would I take away from how we approached this study? Now, I've been thinking a lot about we all know within the industry how much things are changing in terms of how we undertake projects, what type of projects we undertake. And in the world of smaller, quicker studies, I've been thinking about the need or the usefulness of taking an iterative approach to research. And what I mean by this is where each study builds upon the last, and it's an ongoing cycle. So we are now in a sort of a trend and a movement where we don't undertake as many large-scale projects, those massive 2 or 3, maybe 4 maximum studies a year that take a long time to complete. But rather we might take 10 or 20 or more studies in a year. And this idea is that we should be using all the knowledge that we've got and building upon it all the time, iterating the questions, iterating our understandings. And it's not intended to be a linear process, although just for visual sake, you can see it's kind of laid out here. But there's maybe 4 areas, 4 steps, the phases that we could be in. You can have the foundations, really understanding the landscape, both within your brand and your category, but also the broader cultural landscape. We can dig deeper. We can delve into specific areas, really understand what's going on there. We can evaluate. This can be testing ideas, concepts before they go out, or actually evaluate decisions that's been made. And then challenge. I think it's incredibly important that we always revisit our original understandings. Nothing's staying static. Things are changing. So we need to always revisit our understandings and confirm that they're solid, that things haven't shifted. Now, in terms of this study, well, we actually kind of started here. If you think about it, we created an ad test of an effect. And so we were evaluating, on the types of media, how people were feeling. Where actually, if I was to do it again, maybe starting here at the foundations or digging deeper to understand what's going on. And I think it would have been really interesting, easily done with some quick webcam interviews to have some dig deeper, to do those conversations, one-on-one conversations that would have helped inform the online survey. So a quick summary of 4 things that I would do differently. The first is I'd start smaller. Not jump into a 1,500 person survey and as I've just said, actually go and do those quick interviews. And, maybe 5, 10 would have been enough just to actually uncover some of those feelings that we found about authenticity, about being all in, about media representation and the accurate portrayals. So starting smaller, because then that could have helped inform the questioning that we came to within the quantitative portion within the survey. I would have also iterated the questions, and that could have been within the interview stage where, building on, doing a handful of interviews, 2 or 3, seeing what common themes are emerging, building upon what I've learned for the next questions, just to keep building on that knowledge. But similarly, could have done that within the survey as well. So starting smaller and perhaps having maybe 3 different surveys of 500 people each to, again, keep building that knowledge. I've already said this, but I'd mix approaches. I think it was fantastic what we got out of the survey. The quantitative piece would have been great to have had that deeper element with some interviews. And I would love to go back in and ask again. I think we got some really interesting findings. I think potentially validating or confirming a lot of what we know, and certainly hammering home the need for authenticity. It's something that's talked about a lot today. But it shows it is so true and important to people that we are staying true to who we are as a brand. But I would like to go learn some more. And so I'd like to go back in and ask some more questions. And with that, Rachel, I'm going to open up the floor for questions.
Thanks, Zoe. That was such a great presentation. So, giving the real world examples is always so great. At this time, we're going to open the floor for our Q&A. Use the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen to type in your questions. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to do so, so you can go ahead right now and don't be shy. All right, it looks like there's some really good questions coming in. So let's get started. The first question that came in is, what's the best way of gauging what causes are important to your customers?
The best thing is to ask. I know I've just said that, but I do think that you will have a sense of your brand and who your target is, and there is a lot of information out there, and you'll probably have a lot of information already within your brand. Let's call it insights vault, if you will. And but taking all that information, maybe building out some hypothesis, and then going in and ask. And finding particularly if you've got to choose one. I mean, very often we're going to have to focus in on, we want to go all in on this one area. So it is an important decision to make. And so asking and making sure that you're following up with your customers to find out what's going to be most relevant for them and in the context of your brand.
Great. This next question is really cool. Did you get a sense during the study of which causes were most top of mind right now, if there was anything else besides the LGBTQ support?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. Do you know, we didn't really focus on that, and I'm racking my brain because we did have as I said, a blinded question up front because we wanted to understand who was what we called LGBTQ allies. So those that were supportive of that community, so that we could have a good read of that make sure that we had a good read of that within the study. And so we did ask about some other social causes, environmental, animal welfare, and so on. But there was nothing, we didn't focus on that. And I think that if my sense is, this isn't backed up, that just a general kind of social causes and in terms of inclusivity is a big deal, but I'd probably want to go out and have a look and maybe do some more asking around that.
Great. And kind of a follow-up to that too is, what originally spearheaded this piece of research?
Yeah, great questions. You know, it was literally just looking around at Pride Month and being quite noticeable on how many brands, if you walk down, well, not everybody lives in a town with a high street, as it were, but just noticing the number of nods to Pride Month with the rainbow flags in storefronts, but also seeing it within some advertising and so on. And it did feel, you know, we are in a more turbulent sort of political atmosphere at the moment, and you know, that was something that was noticeable for me, certainly in the Super Bowl ads, of how many this year and last year, and how many were promoting that unity and inclusiveness and love message. So just kind of taking all these different ideas together and thinking, I wonder how people are feeling, and so we were fortunate enough to be able to go in and ask.
Great. So how about, do you have any suggestions to how I should be measuring customer response, or how often?
I would say, that's going to be so dependent on your brand, and where you're starting from. Are you starting from sort of point A, where you've identified a cause and that you're looking to understand how your efforts are being perceived? I would definitely say at a minimum. Well, again, it's always difficult to put hard and fast rules, but certainly quarterly. Because things do change, but it's going to be so dependent on what you're trying to do, who your customer base is, what area you're in, your industry, and so on. So a horrible answer in the sense of it depends.
I think it was a great answer.
Thanks.
And we have two more questions that came in, and we'll work with this one first. It's, we always learn more from our failures than our successes. Do you have any other examples other than RAM that have missed in their cause support attempts?
Oh, that's a great question. Now that I'm on the spot, I just can't think of any, although I know I looked at that. I'm going to have to put that on hold for now. I think that's a really great question, and because I agree with it so much. When we understand and we look at what didn't go right, and if I do take the RAM example, certainly with best intentions to try and say this is what we support, and it just didn't work so well, and it'd be interesting to kind of figure out some more of what went quite so wrong, and how did the mark get missed so much, and what was the missing and the gauging of intent, or how people would understand it. So sorry not to have a better answer on that, because I think that is a great question. I think it's a great point that we do learn from our failures, and we actually don't talk about them enough. I've said that in other areas. So yeah, it's a good one.
Great. And our last question that we'll have time for today, and don't worry if you sent in any questions, we'll definitely respond and follow up after. So Zoe, what should a company do to ensure they're being seen as authentic?
So I think that there's a number of different pieces, and I'm actually going to go back to the quote. In fact, I can, if it's easy enough to do, to flip back to the screen. It is about being all in. I think it's not about. It can be dangerous. It doesn't. It can be. It could cause problems if you simply just try and do something that's, hey, we're checking this box. But if you've actually taken a thoughtful approach, so if we're taking the LGBTQ study, or the LGBTQ rainbow flag, and people just saying, oh, it's Pride Month, okay, we're going to support that. And equally, you could say that for Cancer Awareness Month. So if you think on October, which we're coming to on Monday, it's Breast Cancer Awareness, so Pink Month, if you like, are we going to say the same brands just putting a pink ribbon on and say, hey, we've checked that box? It is more about how are we going to support this cause. If we believe it's that important, then are we going to have any kind of initiative to support it beyond the public display? Are we going to be raising any funds? Are we going to be helping our employees, doing things internally? What is the systems, the mechanisms we're putting in play? So it's really about making sure that it is authentic, and it's also going back to that idea of we're not just doing this as a money play. This is something that we believe in, and when we do talk about things, and this goes for any cause and any kind of marketing or anything in life, when we are genuine about something, when we're authentic, when it's coming from a good place, that is recognizable. But having the other pieces around it, it's not just about the sort of the public display of support for X, Y, or Z.
That was great. Thanks so much, Zoe. What a great presentation. I really got a lot from it personally. So it looks like we've reached the end of our time together. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar, Being All In, How Insights Can Help Brands Hit the Right Note When Supporting Causes. Like I said before, if there were any questions that did not get answered, we'll follow up soon. Or you can contact us at webinars@focusvision.com, and we'll respond to your question at that time. Thank you so much for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.